I love the second or two before I hit this button and hit record, because the pre conversation is always so fun that I wish people were there, but of course that would defeat the purpose. Baer, thank you for joining. Thanks for catching up. It is so cool you caught up and connected with me. You're a busy guy. You are probably the busiest person I know in lockdown. It's hard to see when I look at all the different things you're doing that you're actually even in lockdown.
Thank you, Chris. Fantastic to be with you as always. Hey, everybody out there. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have kept myself busy and kept the team busy. Some of that's on purpose. Some of that's just fortuitousness, and some of it's just personal preference, right? I do not do well with idle time, so I will fill a calendar as well as anybody, just to kind of keep myself sane. And in some ways, though, I'm as busy as I ever have been. It's just a different busy, right? So instead of getting on a plane and going to Vegas and doing a speech and then going to Orlando and doing a speech, it's 11 Zoom calls a day, whether it's clients or my team or prospects or other things. So it's definitely a different way to spend time, but it's spending time nonetheless.
You launched this business, Convince and Convert. Mm-hmm. When was the launch?
July 1st, 2008. So next week will be 12 years.
And that's around what, I mean, we started talking to each other probably 2005, 2006, 2007 in there. Mm-hmm. What was it before? What were you doing right before that?
Before then, I had started a company called Mighty Interactive in 2000, which was a digital strategy firm, not dissimilar really from what we do at Convince and Convert, just obviously before social. And I subsequently sold that firm to a full service ad agency. And so in the years preceding the beginning of Convince and Convert, I was on my earnout. So I was working at a full service agency until the conclusion of my contract. So I was doing similar things in Arizona, in a somewhat similar capacity. But it's interesting, when I moved to Indiana, because I just wanted to be more in the, so to speak, and I wanted to be in the middle of the country. So I said Indiana, and I just picked Bloomington, where we live now. Didn't know anybody, just packed up and moved. It was really good, Chris, because when I moved here, I literally didn't know a single person. So clearly didn't have any clients. And when I moved to Indiana, it forced me to operate sort of on a non-geographically constrained basis, right? So it was like, well, I don't know any clients, I don't know anybody, so I'll take anybody from wherever. And whereas when I was in Arizona running my businesses there, I'd been in Arizona the whole time, and so I had a very, very deep and rich network of business contacts. And so I was sort of a big deal in Arizona. But then when I moved to the Midwest, I had to say, well, I'm just going to go national, and that was super scary, but it actually worked out great. It sort of forced me to play on a bigger field because there was no smaller field to play on.
They always talk a lot about sort of like overnight successes, and everybody knows how untrue that is. But so for instance,
remember your elevator video about that years ago, which was money.
Thank you. And
you link that up in the chat.
Possibly still the most watched video I ever made, whether or not I like that. Scott Woodard here always wants to hear people's origin stories and tales of woe and all that. One of the things that I think of when I think of you is I don't know, since I've known you, any massive failure, massive foible. I don't know a single huge F up you've had since you really kind of started this trajectory going. So one, out yourself if there's any that you've ever said publicly. And two, did you do that already way before, and that's why we don't get those stories?
I've been super lucky in that I haven't had any real disasters. I had lots and lots and lots of small scale failures, some by design and some by circumstance, but nothing where I was like, man, that was a real problem or sort of threatened the livelihood of Convince and Convert or my people or our clients. But as somebody who is never happy at sort of a pathological level, so what I always tell my team, the good news is I'm never happy, and the bad news is I'm never happy. You're always pushing, and when you always push, at some point you're gonna push into the rocks. So there's things that we have failed at. We've done a number of online courses at Convince and Convert that have not been particularly successful. I've discovered that's not really my bag. Like, I see so many of our contemporaries who make all kinds of money and are really, really good at online courses. And I just have discovered now that I don't know why. I read the books and I watch the webinars, but I just can't quite crack the code on that. So that's been an issue. You may remember, Chris, a few years ago, I started a project. This is maybe my biggest failure at the individual project level. I built a division for a thing we created called marketing podcasts. It was marketingpodcast.com. So the idea was Google for podcasts, because podcast discovery was really a problem then, and it's still not great, I would argue. And so we literally built a proprietary search engine that would allow you to locate marketing podcasts based on topic, based on authority, based on popularity, et cetera. And it worked great. It was a really good piece of software. The problem was I never actually figured out how we were going to monetize it. It was one of those deals. I learned an important lesson in that, Chris, which was just because it's a good idea doesn't mean you have to actually pursue it. Because it had nothing to do with any other part of our business. It was just sort of like this loose, flappy appendage, which was not strategic and just kind of diverted my team's attention from other things. So it was a good lesson, and I've tried to not repeat that mistake. But I am a 7th generation entrepreneur. My son's an 8th generation entrepreneur. I am pathological about business ideas. So when I'm out with my friends fishing or on the boat, I mean, a bunch of my friends are entrepreneurial as well. We'll come up with 3 or 4 business ideas, in an afternoon. And it's all talk, of course, until you go ahead and do one like marketing podcasts and lose all your money. So.
Oh my gosh. So Jason had a question for you too. Jason says, do you consider Jay Today a failure, and why did you stop? And I bet I know the answer ahead of time. I just want to see how well I know Jay Baer. I don't think it was a failure. I think you consolidated because you had other new shows you wanted to put together, and it was just the right time to end that one. But I want to hear your
set it up. Thanks, Jason. Nice to see you. I used to do a podcast, a video podcast called Jay Today. It was really one of the first episodic video podcasts of short form. Years and years now, everybody does that kind of stuff. People do a daily LinkedIn video or whatever. And so I was super early to that premise. And it was a 3-minute video, 2 or 3 times a week, just about kind of marketing and business and life and stuff. And I think it was successful. It did pretty well. I stopped it for only one reason, which was I felt like I was having to manufacture topics, right? It was no longer, I have an organic pile of topics and I can't get to them all. It was, I got to do another video, and what should it be on it? It started to feel like an obligation. And to me, if you're creating content, once it starts feeling like an obligation, you're not really serving the audience, you're serving the cadence. And so we stopped it.
There's so many other shows to get done in the process. Speaking of shows, as I was checking in to make sure I hadn't lost sight of anything, I was thinking a lot about, Social Pros, but there's also Social Pros. You also run Standing Ovation, and you have a new one coming called Bold Creators. Can you talk about your 3 podcasts?
Yeah, and I actually had Talk Triggers podcast in between those. So after Jay, which was a 20 episode show about word of mouth. So Social Pros has been weekly since January 2012. So we're at almost 450 episodes, and it's an audio only podcast about enterprise social media managers. It's such a fun show because we get to talk to people who do incredible work for incredible brands. Last Friday's episode was Adrian Parker, who Chris, who's now the global CMO of Patron, talking about how do you use social media to market tequila, a topic near and dear to my heart. So it's just it's really fun to have those conversations. So that show continues to succeed and is definitely our highest rated show by design. It's in the top 15 Apple podcasts on marketing of all time in terms of cumulative audience. So it's a popular show. And now I do the Standing Ovation show, which is really scratching the itch on the speaking side. So each week I interview a professional speaker about their signature story. So the story that they always include in their speeches. And the tagline of that show is where professional speakers tell the stories of their stories. And it's really fun. It's super intimate, very conversational. And we drill down really deep. So if you're into speaking or the craft of speaking, you will love that show. It doesn't have the same kind of audience size as Social Pros, nor is it intended to, but for that kind of core speaking community, I think it's a show that's increasingly vital. So that's fun. And the new show, thanks for mentioning it, Chris, is called Bold Creators. It's going to launch in a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks. I'm doing it with Wix, the web development and web platform company. And each episode, I interview somebody who is the founder or CEO owner of a noteworthy web design company, and we talk about sort of their journey. One of the things that I know to be true about the web design business, because I used to be in the web design business at one point, is there is no successful web design company that didn't at some point almost go out of business, right? It is never a linear progression. It's always a roller coaster. So we talk about those stories and what makes them a great firm. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
I love that Jess Tyson showed up because she is so lovable.
I have my Don't Panic Management mug from Jess right here. Always
oh my gosh. I have nothing to add to that one. We also have a professional audience member, Bob Farnham.
Love Bob.
Just talking about Bob's such a great guy, but it's just so funny because he's like us. I always joke all the time about the fact that, you know, we're all a bunch of idiots all going around the internet watching each other's shows and being on each other's shows. Bob
is the Kevin Bacon of digital marketing.
It's all 1 degree here. It is like, it's our family tree is a stick, you know, that old joke. Yeah. So it is definitely that. So around these parts, I only have a very few signature things to this show. And one of them is the incredible 90-degree segue where I talk about something that had no buildup right before it. So my 90-degree segue comes from Carey in the comments, Carey O'Shea Gorgon, who says, fun fact, Baer is a certified Kansas City BBQ Society judge. And by the way, that means it's because there's 5 or so other prominent American barbecue centers in this world. You take the sauces seriously. Can you talk through what Kansas City BBQ is known for, and then talk a little bit about how that happened?
My dad owned a steakhouse when I was a kid, so I've always been prone to meat and fire. And I had this idea when I moved here to Indiana. My friends and I were going to start a competitive barbecuing team. And there's some TV show documentaries, Barbecue Pitmasters, best known of them, that kind of chronicle the competitive barbecuing circuit. And I was enchanted by that premise of cooking meat overnight and drinking beer in a lawn chair. I thought that sounds great. But given my travel schedule in previous times, it was not realistic for me to be on the traveling competitive barbecue circuit, nor was it particularly financially viable. However, you can be a certified judge and then go to individual or apply to be a judge at individual barbecue contests. So you don't have to do it weekly. You can do it a couple times a year or a couple times a month, what have you. And I also felt like if I was ever going to start a barbecue team, being a certified judge would help you kind of understand what the judges are looking for, obviously. So I did that. I went to barbecue school for 2 days in Illinois, and they taught you all the ins and outs of what to look for. For example, Chris, did you know that when you were judging barbecue, the scale goes from 0 to 9? There is no 10 because there's no such thing as perfect barbecue.
I did not know that. So what are the characteristics of Kansas City style versus other styles?
Kansas City style is typically known as meat with a little bit of sauce, typically applied after the fact on top as opposed to in the preparation. The other thing that's particularly noteworthy about Kansas City style is it is all the meats, right? So in a Kansas City style barbecue competition, you always cook chicken, pork ribs, pulled pork, and beef brisket. So it's the 4-way meats, whereas in other barbecue competitions, they are typically either swine-based, mostly in the South, or in Texas, more brisket focused. So I like Kansas City because you have to be good at 4 different things.
Am I right that Kansas City, that's the one where it's mostly a lot more smoking goes into that compared to, like, say, there's a vinegar based up in the Carolinas and all that.
Definitely ketchup-based sauce. Yep, for sure. Ketchup-based sauce, not vinegar-based sauce or mustard-based sauce, which is more of a Tennessee, South Carolina style.
Interesting. Does that let me ask a question. I always ask people who are known for being really good at something like that. Can you show up at somewhere stupid and eat stupid barbecue and still be happy, or does it wreck the feeling?
No, it doesn't wreck the feeling at all. And what's interesting is a lot of things in competitive barbecue might not be what you're looking for in backyard barbecue and vice versa. I'll give you a quick example. So you're probably familiar with the premise of sort of fall off the bone ribs, right? So you go to somebody's house and then these ribs are so tender, they fall off the bone and they just sort of disintegrate. That is often viewed as a pro in a sort of backyard barbecue setting. In competition, it would be a 0 or a 1 There's a definite sort of tenderness sort of level that you're looking for in competitive barbecue. The way they teach you in judging school is when you take a bite of a rib, what you want is for the meat to pull slightly away from the bone, but not remove itself from the bone. And what you want to have is a half moon bite mark in the rib when you bite it. So the things that you might say, wow, Chris, great job on these ribs, you would be disqualified for that in competition. And so a competition style rib might be viewed as too tough in a backyard setting. So it's just the way it's just like a dog show, right? Like you might think this is the cutest dog ever, but this dog wouldn't even be eligible for a dog show because it's not purebred or whatever.
I just started laughing because I thought of Fred Willard in Best of Show.
Oh, God rest him. Yeah.
Don't you think you could
force them out for Fred Willard, man?
That's right. Don't you think you could have given him like maybe a little hat, like one of them Sherlock Holmes hats? Oh my gosh, Jay, you are a very rich and colorful guy. I don't mean rich in the money sense, but that too. You are a man of riches when it comes to your interests and your whatever. What do people least expect when they've seen you speak a whole lot of times professionally? I made the joke. I said, if I were going to say something mean about you behind your back, I would say about how utterly prepared you are. That's like the meanest thing I can think of to say about you, by the way. What are things people don't know about you, plus or minus, that, just don't fit into the Jay Baer persona, but that are definitely a whole part of who you are?
That's interesting.
See, you're so planned. You're so planned. You can't say something like,
"Well, you can't."
Do you know I'm also a backup singer and Ice T's
man. You can't see the label of the jar that you're in. I would say that most people who don't actually spend time with me or just sort of see me in a webinar or whatever, they don't think I'm funny.
They
don't know that I'm funny until they see me live.
I hear that. According to Chris Anderson, by the way, the original name for Convince and Convert was Barbecue and Tequila.
That's not true, but but I am working on a new barbecue sauce brand with my friends called El Tigre barbecue sauce, which is going to be smoked agave flavored. It's going to be incredible. Stay tuned.
You also don't know is Jay wrestled under the name El Tigre in high school.
I did. I did not wrestle in high school, but I was named most likely to be a game show host.
Gosh, how true is that? I mean, there is that uncanny kind of Drew Carey-ness. You don't ever hear that 30,000.
That's my guy, man. That's my guy. I've said this before, and I will say it right now while we were recording. The only job I want, other than the job I have, is Price is Right host. So the second that Drew Carey is like, you know what? I'm good. I've done this long enough. Application is in. Like, I'm out. I will drop this business like a hot rock. And I'd love to slowly poison Drew Carey if that's an option, if anybody knows anybody.
I think slowly poisoning him is always an option. I just watched a stand-up bit with him. I think the show's called This Is Not Happening on Comedy Central, and they have YouTube clips. And he talked about going to the Electric Daisy Carnival with a friend. And how everybody besides he was doing drugs there because, he's the host of Price is Right. I can't do drugs. And the whole time he's saying that, he's laughing and smiling. And the story is actually one of the funniest things I've ever heard. But the two things that make it funny are he laughs at himself horrendously throughout the whole thing. Like why Drew is not a stand-up anymore, number one. And number two, it just really shows the wealth of who he is. And he does. Like, people say to you, do you ever think like Drew Carey? He's a lot like you in that way, except I don't know that he's in any way as prepared as you are, as driven as you are. What's the next
two I get are Drew Carey and Tom Arnold. Those are the two things that people say that
I can see Tom, I guess so. I mean, I'd rather Carey out of the two.
I don't know. But whatever.
You could definitely be a game show host. We know a person who thinks they want to be a virtual game show host throughout this whole process. When you think of other formats, this is back into real business content for what three humans who showed up for that. When you think about formats for other ways that we could do this fun, I've seen good and bad game show execution on Zoom calls and things like that. What's your take on that? What's your take on levity in these calls? Because I'm a little twisted about it myself.
I think there's a important distinction between levity and frivolity. Levity is always welcomed. Frivolity may be inappropriate. But one of the things that I've discovered, and I'm doing a lot more virtual speaking and virtual MC work. In fact, I hosted a 3-day event last week for a global pharmaceutical company, not typically known for their hilarious hijinks. Yet they not only allowed me to, but encouraged me to do a lot of bits and stunts and giveaways and game show host type things during this 3-day global all hands call, because the world right now is heavy. It is burdensome under the best of conditions. It is terrifying and terrible under the worst of conditions. And so I think everybody craves some laughter and some lightheartedness. Now, you can't overplay that hand. And that's the difference between somebody who is experienced and inexperienced. And frankly, Chris, as you said, somebody who is prepared and unprepared. As you learn in the speaking business, you know this well, Chris, you can tell when somebody's really prepared when everybody in the audience thinks they're not. That's the art of it, right? The art of it is to be massively prepared, but not feel like it's prepared. That's the difference.
I feel that is right there in that one sentence, the ultimate goal, where everyone else is trying to make these flawless executions. I'm looking to try to look like an absolute bumbling idiot, because if I can do it just so, it works. And if I don't, it's like the difference between someone attempting satire and offending people deeply. Yeah. I find that happens a bunch.
Yeah. I have a little anecdote about this. So last week, the guest on my Standing Ovation podcast was Captain Charlie Plum. He's one of my favorite people. He and I are a mastermind together, so I'm honored to call him a friend, a prisoner of war in Vietnam for many, many years, an incredibly decorated naval aviator. His flight instructor at the academy was the departed Senator John McCain, for whom I used to work. And Plum has been a world-class, phenomenal keynote speaker since he got back from Vietnam. So going on almost 40 years now. So he tells a story. His signature story is, of course, related to his time in captivity. And one of the things I asked him on the show, again, it's out now, was, you've been telling this story, basically straight through for nearly 40 years. Tell me about how you've changed it. And one of the things he said was amazing is that audiences in the early days of public speaking, right? This, expected perfection, right? They wanted every comma, every semicolon, more of an oratory, right? More of a very, very polished, almost machine-like delivery.
Yes.
But now audiences want it to feel spontaneous. And so he actually, in his delivery, purposefully makes mistakes. He calls it planned inadequacy. And he said he does it because it allows the audience to feel more a part of the story and not create that distance between somebody who's hyper competent as a speaker and an audience member. And I thought that was just absolutely fascinating.
You should shut the recorder off right about then. Sorry, Charlie, and just hang up on him.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Oh, wow. That's big. That's that weird feeling you have when you think someone's, anxious to get on your show, so they invite you on their show. I couldn't be on Standing Ovation. I don't have a signature story.
Some people don't. Yeah. So especially in the marketing game, Chris, a lot of people don't, because they're always rooted in kind of case studies and examples and always change them all the time. I find that the other flavors of speaking, motivational, sales, diversity, etc., tend to have signature bits.
Yes,
a little bit more, and that's fine, just the way it works.
Yeah, no, so when I watch yours, I'm like, not me. Dr. Nick Morgan wrote about me in one of his books on speaking because I famously or infamously paid him like $6,000 for advice I couldn't use. I left there like, well, thanks, boss. And all I thought when I walked out,
I didn't exactly, advice, is that okay?
I didn't exactly want to give away that much money, but I thought, man, I am something different. And Lou Mangello wanders in, famous Lou Mangello, we should all say. This guy's just winging it. I love him. That was what he thought about me. That's what I do. I make it as best I can to look like I wing it. But if I didn't have a plan, they wouldn't keep inviting me back.
Absolutely.
But I've even had people who have invested a great deal of money be like, what are you doing? And then I'll show them the notes and they're like, oh, well, I don't like what you're doing, but I get that you think you're doing it in a very planned way. So that's me. But when you say that about the story, Mexico City. I did this event in Mexico. Mitch Joel had done it before me. I messaged him midway through the event and said, what the shit? I was supposed to be on at 11 a.m. I didn't get on until 7 p.m. because of Mexico time.
Wow.
And there was a guy supposed to speak after me. Thank Buddha he was speaking after me. It was that guy from that you know, the movie Alive? Like, you know, the people ate the people, like the Guatemalan soccer guys ate the people. Yeah. He's one of the guys who ate people. And I guess he's
that's
keynote
a signature
speaker.
Story. That's the kind of,
that's a signature story, dude. So he does it with music in the background. He keeps doing his like little Jesus hands. You know what I mean? He's got the Jesus hands going. And I'm just thinking, thank God he was after me, because I'm talking about typing and how cool it is to like put your photo on a stupid website. I would have killed myself. He afterwards, though, out drinking tequila, by the way, in Mexico City, in Garibaldi Square, with it was Eduardo and Raul. They said, nobody likes that guy. No, we hear him all the time. We hear the same story all the time. I was like, one, that's weird, because that was like a massive story, and two, how funny. I wish you had told me that, before I had
ahead of time, right?
So that was a really long blather to say there are so many different types. There are so many different types. And this planned inadequacy, I can't see you doing it, but I do wonder, because as you said that about orating, I wonder how, when radio and theater stars came to the movies, they talked like they had to reach the back, and then after a while, like it changed, right? And then you can really see it in the 70s, and you can really see it in different parts of the film.
Yep.
Are we in that again right now because of does coronavirus and all this stuff change this, because we all had to learn how to be Zoom stars now, or what's changed or hasn't because of that?
I think it's too early to call it, but there's no doubt that what a remote meeting, virtual summit, webinar, if you want to use that term, what that is, what that form is, and what it can be is absolutely changing, and it's changing almost in real time. Many people are now, who used to speak live, are now speaking virtually. I've been doing it for more than a decade, which has been a huge win for our team and myself during the pandemic, because a lot of meeting planners and speakers bureaus know that I already had experience doing it, so they're comfortable having me do it now, which is a huge help. But people are pushing the form, right? People like Brian Fanzo and Vin Jiang and other people are building out full-blown studios, right, in their home office to be able to deliver rich, interactive, engaging presentations from their own home. And that level of effort wouldn't typically have been necessary or worth it, maybe, in the past, and now it certainly can be. And so right now, when you say, we're going to do a webinar, I think that is almost a pejorative and carries some baggage with it. I believe that within the next 8 to 12 months, it's going to flip, right? And in the same way that you're starting to question the viability of commercial office space, like, well, we've proven that we can all work remotely, so why would we go back to paying for an office? I think you're going to start to see the same thing around events. Like, we could have a live event and pay for a hotel and granola bars and AV and a union crew, or we can just do this virtually. And so I think we're going to start to see the pendulum shift, and it's going to be fascinating to see where we end up.
I'm of that mind that, a lot more people are going to reassess some of this, that they're looking at. For one, thank goodness for the work from home thing. I had been since the 90s when I worked in telecom as a project manager. I was really trying to push harder for a lot more remote workers, mostly very selfishly. It's about an hour commute one way for me back in the day. And who doesn't love audiobooks? This was before podcasting. But I would convince everybody this would be such a better use of my time to be at the house, already online. And when it comes to the presentation, everyone's going to say, who's going to say it the most? They're salespeople. They're going to say, well, there's nothing, you can't beat this in face-to-face. Face-to-face is absolutely advantageous in so many ways, but dollars and cents, once you kind of look it all over, there's not always as much of an impetus to get us out to those spots.
The unit economics of a virtual event are so much better than the unit economics of a live event. And people are going to start to realize that and proceed accordingly. I think the hybrid event is going to be the standard. very quickly, which is, yeah, we're going to have a live event, but instead of having 1,000 people live, we're going to have 300 people live. We're going to have 2,000 join virtually. It allows you to broaden the base of the event because people don't have to take 3 days off and pay all the money and do all the stuff. And now that's not to say that some events won't continue, because for a lot of industries, and I think we tend to forget this, for a lot of industries, that annual conference for the whatever insurance agents or collision auto dealers or whatever, that's a vacation, right? That's why these events are in Vegas or Orlando or New Orleans or Nashville, because it's a vacation. They're bringing their spouse and they might bring the kids, and it's not for them doing it virtually. It's not really about the learning. It's about the experience, and you can't replace that.
It's I don't know if you've ever been in this situation. Probably. I was at a Australian wealth planning event, and the Australian wealth planning event was held in Buenos Aires, and I was there as literally the court appointed education, because these things had been, voted in they got beat by a judge saying, this is just partying, dudes. You got to do some actual learning,
do some actual work.
I was legitimately the person between them and their beers and their women and their steaks for days kind of a life. And I was like, wow, am I going to win this one? I just said, guys, I'm in it with you. And I got flown down here for a lot of money, and I'm only here for 18 hours. So I'm going to get in and out as fast as you want to get in and out. So ask all the questions you want. Just anything that comes up, just get ready to ask me a very long question, and we'll get out of here.
That's great.
Jay, you absolutely study comics because you have to, because you're a super funny guy, and every professional speaker of any real sauce does. Who are your secret favorite comics, modern, and who are kind of the absolute, if you really had a few hours to live, you might actually put one of these on kind of comics?
I do. I've been a comedy fan for a long time, and I'm really fortunate that here in Bloomington, small college town, we have a very well-respected and popular comedy club here called the Comedy Attic, which actually reopens tomorrow night. And we get very, very good touring comics through here, despite the fact that it's a very small town, because the owners are so respected and it's close for routing for bigger cities. So I am really fortunate in that regard. I would say favorite current comic, probably John Mulaney. I love how he can, that guy can do a 20-minute story that feels like it's 30 seconds long. And his phrasing and his perspective, I think, is terrific. I love him. I will tell you, my all-time favorite comic is the first comic I ever fell in love with. I've been fortunate enough to see him 3 times live, including twice here in town, audiences of 50 people, right? Where I was, from me to this microphone from the stage, Emo Phillips.
Oh, what a good show.
Probably my all-time favorite comic, and certainly the person who I shouldn't say that. He's the second person that got me in love with comedy, the person who got me to fall in love with comedy. And I think at some level put me on this career path, at least as a presenter, is Bill Cosby. When I was a kid, and I'm deceptively youthful looking, my parents had all the Bill Cosby records. And so my brother and I would play the Bill Cosby albums over and over and over and over. And that way of storytelling was sort of imprinted on me at a very early age. And I tend to, as a default, kind of go down that road, obviously with, 0.05% of the talent or skill, but my style on stage is sort of longer story passages like that.
My mom and dad were radio DJs back in the 60s, so we had an incredible record collection. We had all the Bill Cosby records. We wore grooves in certain ones. Why Is There Air?
Why Is There Air is the best. I was going to say that's the best one.
The go-kart races, I to this day might be sitting at a stoplight somewhere going na 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 na, and I think that there's the invisible snakes in the bedroom. Very good storytelling that doesn't exist. Too bad for his flim flam filth, but the art.
Yeah, it's weird, right? It's like Bill Cosby, Michael Jackson, and several others, even more modern comics.
Chris D'Elia last week.
Yeah, it's Louis C.K. I mean, it's
It's been interesting watching them try to find their way back out of it too. Louis C.K.'s outperforming again. And
I saw that.
It's just a thing now. And so that's interesting. I mean, it's I don't have any great topic for this. I think just talking as if there were only two of us and not a room. I would say that I think it's always interesting which ones may somehow possibly find their way to redemption. And it's also interesting to, see kind of what's changed in all that space. My dad would put on Bill Cosby, a lot of Bob Newhart, which, old Newhart skits were great. The other part of that was I was thinking, the Smothers Brothers. I went and saw them perform live. Nice. That was one of those moments where I was like, I want to do that.
I need a funny brother.
Yeah, well, right. One funny brother, and then you're going. And my little brother's reasonably funny, and he's got great musical talent. But he, as much as I love the stage, he is so thrilled to not be anywhere near a stage. I've never figured that out. Listen, related and then back to sort of this sort of thing. What's your prognosis right now? What are you teaching people on how to be slightly better communicators in this dark and trying times? In these trying times, Jay, how are you teaching people how to be better communicators? What's the message they need to hear about that?
I mean, obviously it depends from client to client, but I think categorically I would say this. Every business right now is a startup. It doesn't matter if you've been in business for 190 years. You've actually only been in business since you reopened your doors, because all of the informational connective tissue between your business and the customers that have been built up over years and decades and maybe centuries in some circumstances, none of that matters. None of it. I had Lori Meacham from JetBlue on Social Pros on Friday. Episode's not out yet, but I recorded it on Friday. And she was telling me that there's been this huge spike in Google searches for the phrase, "Are airlines still in business?"
Wow.
I mean, stuff that never, ever, ever would have been something that consumers didn't understand. Are you open? Do you still have products and services? What do they cost? How, like, I'm getting my hair cut tomorrow. How does that work? Do I call ahead? Do I text? Do I stay in the parking lot? What kind of mask? Like, it's all this crazy stuff. And so think about it this way. If you read a review of a business and that review was written in February, you would give that review literally zero credence whatsoever. It is irrelevant. It is as if that review was never written. It does not matter. It is immaterial. And so every business is a startup. You have to fundamentally rewire the entirety of your customer relationships. You have to re-educate. You have to repackage, which is what we've done a lot at Convince and Convert, is repackage our services. You have to retrain your team. You have to start everything from scratch. And so one of the things I tell people right now is literally grab a piece of paper and write down the 50 questions that your customers have about your business today. The new questions, and then methodically and systematically answer those questions, website, email, social, etc. FAQ is your friend right now. And while this pandemic is unspeakable and tragic in so many ways, I will also tell you, and I believe this to be true, two things. One, how you handle your business over the next 6 months will have a material impact on your success over the next 6 years. And despite how terrible all of this is, you will quite literally never in your lifetime have a better opportunity to grow your business and increase market share. Both of those are true.
It is. I want to put a highlighter on your point. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to end at your point, anything. I just want to put a highlighter on it. And the reason I do is because, and I stole that from Tamsin at some point, long before she fully understood that she should be the red thread. I got an argument on Facebook in my little small town Facebook group the other day. And sometimes I mean to get an argument there. Other times I'm baffled. So I said, I really wish there was kind of like a page started or something. I don't know. I wish there was even a website page, anything. I'm sounding like an old person on like WebEx. I don't even know what I'm saying. I said, I just don't know who's open for business. And I just want to buy a goddamn sandwich. And I don't know where I can spend some money. So I'm just going to make another bologna sandwich because I don't feel like making anything more complicated. And I would have gladly given somebody money.
Yep.
And bologna is Satan's belly button. Right. And so this guy got mad at me. He's like, it's really tough for a restaurant right now. And I like had to look up who he was. Cause you know how like you get mad at somebody and you get scan them with your satellite from the heavens and well, your dog's ugly. And, he was like, he was one of those like food truck delivery guys, not food truck services, but like a Cisco truck guy.
Right.
Except no name brand. And so this guy, his business is restaurants. So I have said as a customer, man, I'm having a hard time spending my money here. So that's what I wrote back. I said, oh, what an asshole I am. I'm trying to spend my money. And I'm saying that no website in my local, I only have 2,500 people in this town. Yeah. There's like 14 total restaurants. None of them said, we're open in this way. We serve in this way. Here's takeout. Yeah,
it's crazy.
And so what you're saying is what I'm feeling. I mean, like literally have to physically walk around to these restaurants to see if any of them are open right now. And now I'm starting to see, there's some tables out. So sometime in 30 days, there might be food. I don't know.
Yeah,
so
I got to show you something. I'm going to show you a graphic real quick.
I want to see it. Bring it. Share the screen. See if you know how to.
I do.
I want to know about Jay's buttonhole.
I can do that too.
The flower-like shaped non-flower.
You see this?
Yep, let's bring it in. Oops, hang on. Let me change my graphicals. Go.
Am I sharing?
I assure you.
We're open, right? To me, that's the classic image of what's going on right now. Like people have no idea what is true, what's not. It changes all the time. Now some people have to reclose, even though they've reopened. It's a complete and total clusterfuck. And so it is look. Fundamentally, as a business, it is your responsibility to educate the customer. It is not the customer's responsibility to learn from you. Like, so if you're not saying, yes, we're open, here's how it works, this is the policy, this is the procedure, this is how we charge now, we've repackaged it, whatever, that's on you, right?
It's a nutty time. But it's a good time. Listen, I have one last question before we get you out, and it's Carey's fault. Tell me about the buttonhole.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I've got lots and lots of these flowers. This one is silk, brown, and cream. I hate pocket squares because I find them fussy, and I also lose them, and I find them hard to fold. I'm sure I could learn to fold them, but real talk, I have not. So I have lots of these, and I just keep them in the buttonhole of the jacket. It gives the same kind of effect, a little pop of color, a little different texture on the jackets, and they just stay on the jackets. And even when you take the jacket to dry clean, they just leave them on there. So that is sort of my variation on the pocket square theme.
I was hoping to be part of a secret society.
Chris, planned. You mentioned earlier that I am hyper deliberate, and yes, point made.
You were so deliberate. Terry Brock, by the way, our friend in
Terry Brock.
Great points. Business
Cabot Award winner Terry Brock for a lifetime of service to the National Speakers Association, richly deserved. One of the best people on the planet, Terry Brock.
I met Terry in the hallway of CES in Las Vegas. And I will tell you that when I met him, I said, I don't know who this man is, but I know he is famous. I know he must be someone very important. That is utterly the first impression I had of Terry Brock. Great points. Yes, we're open. Here's how we can help you now. Thank you, Chris and Jay. Carey, so true. I assure you, everyone should be doing this. Google Maps, social websites, updated proof of life timestamp.
Proof of life, man. I love that. It's a great way to look at it.
No pocket square. Well, I just found a napkin in my pocket before I decided to wash these.
You can do a different bandana every show, Chris.
I could do a bandana. You know, I always think of bandanas as the purview of, the people still on their decisions tree about their hair. You know, I do like a.
This you go different mask every episode. You can go different mask.
I could do that. I have 3. I guess that's, if I just kind of up the ante on masks. I saw, this is apropos of nothing and I shouldn't even say it, but it's just my head because I'm not Jay Baer. I saw Malik complaining about a mask he bought online. Malik is like this famous tech reporter, journalist kind of guy, Silicon Valley guy, super like successful over his career, like complaining about this mask that he bought. And I was like, wow, everybody has our day, right? Like we all have our, I've got to go after something.
Well, things are part of the culture when you're starting to get a 3-star review on a mask, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Yeah.
This has to be just better than fixing the environment. I have to be stylish, and these are not. You said something about how it's like hard to wear.
I served up this T-shirt on Facebook, which is it just says like 2020 and has like the 5 stars underneath for review. It says 2020, 1 star, bad, would not recommend.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty good.
That's our lives now. Well, look, I'm kicking you out. Jay Baer, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having us. People, you can learn more about Jay at jbaer.com. You can follow him on the tweeters at Jay Baer. Jay, thanks so much for catching up. It means so much.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Good to see you as always.
Out we go. I'm hitting the button. Everybody get out.